My parents always like to joke about how Converse were not necessarily cool back in the 80s. It was just what kids wore, their normal everyday footwear, kind of like how we all wear tennis shoes. Nowadays, they cost a minimum $75, and everyone has at least a pair. And can you blame them? They're classic, they're cool, and they go with everything. What's not to love? Nobody loved Converse more than my best friend Sarah. She owned 11 pairs, high tops and low, in shades ranging from classic red to sunshine yellow to baby blue. One could argue she had a bit of an addiction. Where you see shoes, I see Sarah. She wore them everywhere. Theater, school, weekends. Rarely did other shoe brands grace her feet. Converse were all a part of her signature style. But the shoes didn't make Sarah. Oh no, Sarah made the shoes. And she never wore your standard black or white. In fact, she owned everything but those two colors. You know, the two basic colors that everyone buys when they first start wearing Converse. She didn't want them. Because that would make too much sense, right? But that sums up Sarah perfectly. Conventional was just not a word in her vocabulary. Take this pair, for example. She found them at a thrift store and was absolutely obsessed with them. Never mind the fact they'd already spent a good chunk of time on somebody else's feet. Men's, size 8, maroon high tops with the leather side decal, personalized paracord laces, and just the right amount of wear. In her typical Sarah way, she let me borrow them for a concert we went to last October. Her mom let me wear them at Sarah's memorial in January. I remember crying. They laced them up at the church. I had to double knot them to keep from tripping. They squeaked and they flopped as I walked up the stairs to give my speech about how we would each slip on a pair of Converse and go gallivanting off to the movies, to Barnes & Noble, to live shows, to Sonic, everywhere. I emphasized that being friends with her was never logistically easy, but we both loved each other enough to make it work. A psychological science study once said that only 1% of friendships formed in 7th grade will make it through high school. We stayed together until the very end. We had survived middle school and crazy teachers and busy schedules and college applications, and we were having the time of our lives senior year. The future had been full of possibility and excitement, and suddenly it was all gone. I didn't know what to do. We were officially in hell. All of these thoughts rushed through my head as I held her brother after he finished speaking. As we sobbed, all I could think of was I could never, ever fill the big shoes she left behind. She was so creative and smart and authentic and weird and kind and wonderful. She was the best of us. She really was. But I don't want to make her out to be this angel, you know. She wasn't this perfect, shining symbol of humanity. She was just a person. And if she was here, she'd want me to tell it to you straight. She was a horrible, and I mean horrible, procrastinator. She picked up projects quickly and dropped them just as fast. She considered Sour Patch watermelons a meal instead of a treat. She drove without glasses. She never cleaned her room. And worst of all, she never put ice in her soda, which I view as an unforgivable sin. She was relentless in the pursuit of living life in whatever way she wanted. Driving 10 people in her green Kia Soul that legally fits 4, sitting around playing on her Nintendo Switch for hours and hours on end, painting her legs and arms at 5 in the morning just for the hell of it. She was spontaneous and passionate, and I loved that about her. And that fateful night in January, she made a poor choice, and she was distracted and reckless and impatient, but she was just Sarah being Sarah. And I'm not going to be mad at her for being herself. I'm mad she is gone, but I am not mad at her. I just miss her. This past week, I attended the Bonfire Remembrance Ceremony to honor the 12 we lost that day in 1999. And as I was standing there in the twilight hours of the morning, huddled amongst my fellow Aggies, straining to hear the names of the fallen and balancing on the very tips of my toes, I caught a glimpse of the family of one of the victims hug as the bagpipes faintly played Amazing Grace. And I had this moment of clarity that these things never stop hurting. This family lost their child, their sibling, their grandchild over 21 years ago, and have this magnificent memorial and this entire day dedicated to commemorate their loved one. And it still isn't enough. And it still hurts. And that hurt is never going to go away. It will change and evolve and have these different phases. We've all lost someone. You know how it goes. But people seem to think that as grief changes, you are therefore moving on from tragedy and moving on from grief, and you can finally, whatever that means, go back to living your life. And they are just so wrong. You don't move on from grief. You carry on with grief. Just because something can be easier doesn't mean it isn't hard. Yes, my emotions are not as strong and my grief not as raw as it was in January, but that doesn't mean I still don't struggle every single day on what to do without Sarah. There's this unspoken mentality that we have to progress past this invisible milestone of I'm no longer sad and I no longer miss my person that I lost in order to be happy. But that state of being just doesn't exist. And no one should ever feel like a failure when it comes to their own emotions. We shouldn't tell people to move on. Telling me to move on has never really helped me. It's never really helped because when we lose someone, we are losing this singular, unique, unlike any other entity that will never be replaced. No one ever moves on because they lost their person. No one ever really understands what losing someone really feels like because we all have our Sarah, our individual, 100% original version of her. And those versions can overlap in certain ways, but none of them are identical because each one of us perceived her and experienced her in an extremely personal and special way. It's kind of like Converse, right? Everyone in the world could wear the exact same pair of standard, black, boring Converse, and they would mean something different and convey something different for every individual. And I think that is one of the few things about grief that is beautiful, is that it truly shows the complexity of the human soul and the depth of our experience, and that people exist and are perceived in infinite ways contained within this finite container, and that even when we lose people, and even when we ultimately die, we are going to continue on because we are composed of immortal possibilities. Every interpretation of who Sarah was gets passed on and passed on from person to person as we share our individual stories and pictures and videos and memories until suddenly a little part of her is in everyone who hears about her, and she transcends the boundaries of human existence. The people we love will never truly leave us. And because they never truly disappear, the only thing we can move on from is the event of losing them. But other than that, we are leaving nothing and no one behind. You lace up your memories and you carry them with you. And sometimes you will drag them along like heavy work boots, and other times you will balance precariously on stiletto heels. And other times you will comfortably slip on your favorite pair of high tops. But they will always be there, supporting you every day. The hurt will always be there, but it will be okay. Sarah will always be with me. I will be